everybody, welcome back to my channel, Fish Den 365. I'm Den Haring, and today I'd like to talk to you about a 5-step plan to make your 2025 your best fishing year ever. So let's get right into it. So I do these 5 steps. I did these things last year, and I did them with a little bit more focus, and it really turned out to be a good fishing year for me. And part of that, I believe, was because of the preparation that I put into it. And so I'd like to share that with you again this year. I'm in the process of doing some of these things now. So the first step is to maintain, upgrade, and prepare your equipment. And it's really critical now that you take the time. Right now here in Pennsylvania, all the water is frozen. And there's nothing I can do. I can't get out there with the boat and fish. So this is the time of the year when I get everything ready. So here's a rod and reel, for example. One of the things that I'll do is I'll check the guides on my rod to make sure that the guides aren't bent or damaged in any way. I'll make sure there's no grooves in the guide. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to use your eyes. You know, you've heard the stories where you can use a cotton swab or maybe like a pantyhose or something that'll catch if you put it through the guides. But I've done that, and sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. The best thing to do is to get a really good source of light. If you're nearsighted like me, you just take your glasses off and you get up close to this and you look at it, you inspect the guide. If you need to use a magnifying lens, you just get a magnifying lens and do it that way. But there's nothing better than using your eyes for checking the guides for grooves and for damage on the guides. I usually wash my rod and with just a mild soap and a washcloth, and I like to clean the cork on my rods as well. Let me show you what I use for that. Generally, I'll just use warm water and one of these scrubbing pads, and I'll just scrub it down, and that takes a little bit of just the surface grime off, and it makes your cork and your rod look brand new again. And then for the reels, depending on how hard I use the reel, I'll break it down to some extent, make sure everything's functional, put a little oil, a little grease on the appropriate places, and I'll also change my line. Now, this particular reel, I had braided line on here last year, and what I do is I put 225 feet of braided line, 75 yards on braided line, and the way I do that is I have a little line counter so I can count it on when I'm reeling it on. And then underneath that I have backing so that I can fill my spool, but that way I don't waste too much money on braid, because braid's expensive, and the good thing about braid is it lasts long. So what I'll do is I'll use braid for 2 years at least before I change it. And if I use the reel a lot, like this one, what I'll do is I'll reverse it. So I've already reversed the braid. The braid that was on the top of the reel was white and worn. This was the braid that was underneath that never saw the light of day. And so all I do is reverse the braid, and I've got brand new braid on here. Even though it's a year old, I used it last year. If I was to take all the line off, you'd see it down at the bottom. The braid would be quite worn compared to what it looks like here. But that's how I get 2 years out of my braid, at least, sometimes longer. If I'm not fishing the braid a lot, if I'm not fishing that particular reel a lot, then I can get more time out of that. And then what I do is I'll put a piece of black electrical tape on the handle. That tells me that next year I want to replace that braid. So I have a little visual management tool there that tells me when I need to replace the braid. So next year when I'm done fishing, this braid will come off and I'll put new braid on that reel. This is the time of the year if you want to make upgrades to your equipment, new rod, new reel, I got to buy a new line, those kind of things. This is the time of year to do that, make those upgrades. Maybe you can get some gift certificates like I do for Christmas, and that can help pay for it. This is also a good time to check the hooks on your baits, the lures that you like to use. Treble hooks, make sure they're still sharp. If they're not, if they've got a little, sometimes the tips of the hooks will bend in if you hit rocks with them. You got a couple choices. You can replace those hooks, or you can take a file and sharpen them, but you want to make sure that your hooks are sharp for the 2025 season. Step 2 is to determine any needed items that you must have for the year and obtain them. This is the time to obtain everything you need for the year. You don't want to have to be doing this mid-season unless you absolutely have to. So you want to make sure you've got stocked up on the baits that you know you're going to be using. Let's say you were a big Senko fan, you ran a little low, you might want to buy some more Senkos to replace it. Or if you want to fish something a little different this year and you don't have any or only have a few of them and you need more, now's the time to obtain it. Make a list. Make a list of what you have, what you need, and what you need to obtain so that you can buy it and get it in time. I do this every time. I make a list. As time's going on, as I'm discovering what I need and what I don't need, I'm going through my items in my tackle den. I'll write them down, and that will come on my list for the next time I do a purchase on fishing tackle. So once you have now you have your fishing gear upgraded. It's prepared. It's maintained. You did your maintenance on it, and you've gotten and obtained the things that you think that you're going to need for the season. Along the way, you want to be studying the seasonal patterns of the fish that you'll be fishing for. In my case, it's bass. You want to understand, and this is, for me, it's a refresher because this is something that I've been studying for many years, but you want to understand where they're likely to be in the different seasons that you'll be fishing, knowing that there's even seasons within seasons. For example, we all know that there's a pre-spawn, right? The bass, before the spawn, will begin to get very active and eat and feed heavily. Well, you could actually break the pre-spawn up into early pre-spawn, mid pre-spawn, late pre-spawn, and then spawn, and do the same thing all the way through. The more fine-tuned you can get that, the better, because it'll allow you to be better prepared. Early pre-spawn, for example, is when the fish are just starting to move up. That's when you have the opportunity to catch some of the biggest fish of the year. And so you want to be prepared for that, to know what baits to throw and where to throw them. Along with that, understanding seasonal patterns, it's a good time to look at maps of the places that you know you'll be fishing. Understand where they're likely to be coming from, where they're spawn, where they'll move out and spread out during the summer, where they're likely to be in fall and winter as well. Map study is important, and you can look at maps of the places you're going to be fishing and learn and be more prepared when you actually get there, when it's actually time to fish. And that leads to step 4. Determine where you're going to be fishing and when you plan to fish there, if you can. Sometimes that's not possible depending on your schedule, but wherever you can, even if you have a general idea. For example, I know I'm going to be fishing Nakamixin quite a bit. I always do. It's 30 minutes from home. So for me, I already know what I'm going to do there when I go, depending on what time of year it is. Last year, I had a great spring throwing square-bill crankbaits in shallow, specific areas, and so I'll be doing that again this year and fine-tuning that even more. Once you determine where you're going to be going and when, the next step then, the last step number 5, is to plan your attack. That means planning your approach based on the season you're fishing in and where you're fishing. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you plan to go to a lake maybe you've never been in the fall, in September. So now's the time to start doing some internet research and study. And with the advent of AI, now you have even more tools to do this. I was just looking at some information. I have Windows 11 now on my computer, and somehow this AI automatically comes up. It's an AI chat tool, and so I thought I would test it a little bit, and I was amazed at how much better it was than just a year ago. I started testing it with stuff that I knew to see what it could find. And I'll give you an example. A year ago, I was asking AI about a lure called the blue striper and where it became famous in Pennsylvania. And it didn't know. It made up stuff that wasn't true. But I asked it this time, a different AI, a newer AI, more advanced, and it was amazing. It knew all the details. It went right to Raystown Lake, which is where it was really became popular. Told me that it was for stripers and smallmouths. It was very good. So if AI continues to get better and better, you can use that to get seasonal patterns on the lakes that you're fishing, areas that might be good, baits that you can use that would work at that time of year, all those things. That's how you can help develop your plan for what you'll do during that time of year. And then always think about, like when I'll read something about, a spinnerbait is good this time of year, always think of, well, what other baits work when a spinnerbait's working, right? And generally that would be a lipless crankbait, a swim bait, square bill crankbait, chatterbait. So have all those things in mind, and then always make sure you have soft plastics ready to go, because a jig is always a great bait. It's hard to beat a wacky rig in a lot of situations. You just want to have those different baits ready and planned for if the first part of your plan doesn't work out. In other words, if you start throwing that spinnerbait and it just doesn't seem to be catching fish, well, then you can go through your other tools, your other baits, working them in different areas to see if you can't catch fish that way instead. So that's it. That's the 5-step plan. I hope it made sense, and I hope you got something out of it. If you did, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and we'll be back soon with another video. And if you'd like to see a video about a dynamite presentation in the coldest of waters, take a look at this one right here. Until next time, be safe out there, and as always, may God bless your fishing endeavors.